It's now being widely recognized that the media's COVID narrative has indeed collapsed. In this video, we're going to take a look at the latest examples of the implosion of the media's COVID narrative. We're going to see how even left-wing outlets like CNN are admitting that they've lost. And stick with me to the very end of this video when I'll show you why the collapse of the COVID narrative signals nothing less than the collapse of the mainstream media itself. You are not going to want to miss this. Greetings, everyone. Dr. Steve here with you. Great to be with you. As always, I'm your daily fake news antidote. As each and every day, I provide patriotic analysis to help you to think better so you can feel better in these crazy and turbulent and insane times. So if you haven't already done so, you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. Before we begin, as many of you know, we've recently launched a brand new initiative here called Change America, which enables ordinary patriots to do extraordinary things. It's a program that makes it possible for anyone and everyone to help unseat rhinos just by simply doing their daily grocery shopping. It's wonderful. You can back America First candidacies by simply going out to eat. And if you join our Change America campaign right now, you're going to get free complimentary tickets to our upcoming Patriot Live event on January 14th and 15th. So make sure to click on that link below right now to sign up or learn more about our Change America initiative. You're going to absolutely love it. All right, gang, let's dive right in here. You know, there really is no other way of putting this. The mainstream media really is collapsing right before our very eyes with regard at least to the monolithic COVID narrative that's been operative in the mainstream media now for over 2 years. And one of the most bizarre reversals imaginable, the ultra-left Atlantic actually published a piece the other day excoriating Americans for being too freaked out over COVID and wasting all the testing. They're blaming the test shortages that's entirely the fault of the incompetent and continent near octogenarian in the Oval Office who spent more time taking naps in Delaware than taking questions from the media. These left-wing activists of the Atlantic are partly blaming the test shortages on a massive overreaction on the part of what the author called privileged Americans, overly concerned about the latest COVID variant. Now, needless to say, the response to this article was swift. Fox News immediately pointed out that the article contradicted the recommendations from health officials that everyone get tested before family gatherings for the Christmas holidays. But more than that, it's being pointed out that this is a radical departure from the COVID narrative that dominated the Atlantic for the last 2 years. Take a look at this from the Atlantic. It's a headline from April of 2020 when the state of Georgia announced that they would be one of the first states to reopen after the lockdown. Look at this. Georgia's experiment in human sacrifice. The state is about to find out how many people need to lose their lives to shore up the economy. Or how about this one just from a couple of weeks back in December? We know enough about Omicron to know that we're in trouble. Or this, America's not ready for Omicron. The new variant poses a far graver threat at the collective level than the individual one, the kind of test that the U.S. has repeatedly failed. And of course, this doom and gloom has had a scapegoat. We all know who's really responsible for this epidemic, right? It's, of course, the unvaccinated, the modern-day lepers among us. But, of course, that narrative is now collapsing. Fox News is reporting that Biden's claim that we're seeing nothing less than a, quote, pandemic of the unvaccinated, and his repeated claim that vaccinated people can't spread the disease have both fallen apart in light of the evidence, where the outbreak, originally of the Delta variant, forced the CDC to update its guidance for vaccinated people, saying that they were still susceptible to transmitting the variant. And now, of course, with the Omicron variant, there appears to be just as many, if not more, breakthroughs in transmission. So this whole notion of a pandemic of the unvaccinated has collapsed as well. And more than that, we're now hearing and reading comments about COVID regularly and openly mentioned that were once considered taboo. For example, even CNN's medical analyst, Dr. Leana Wen, who, by the way, is the former head of Planned Parenthood, hardly a conservative, even she's come out and said that cloth masks are basically useless in the fight against the spread of Omicron. Even Fauci's admitted that masks are, in his words, quote, not really effective in keeping out the virus. So what's going on here? Well, someone pointed out what CNN is now saying isn't some new information that suddenly came to the surface with the advent of Omicron. These things have always been true. It's just that Omicron's brought these truths to the surface, rendering the media narrative of the salvific nature of masks and the pandemic of the unvaccinated totally untenable and implausible. What we have to understand is that implausibility has come out largely because the mainstream media is being slowly but surely replaced by what's called the network society. Now, this is a major theme on our channel precisely because we're part of it. This channel is part of the rise of the network society. This is where an internet-based society, news and information is basically increasingly dispersed away from centralized control by monolithic news networks, and is increasingly available to all of us, literally at our fingertips, in the palm of our hands, on our smartphones, often brought to us by independent content creators like yours truly. It's very similar to the way email and texting and social media apps have largely replaced the post office. I mean, we still use the post office on occasion, but the vast majority of our contact with one another is through the instantaneous interaction on the internet. That's the network society. And so this massive societal shift away from the old legacy media world to the new independent content creator world is leaving the legacy media in the dust. Take a look at this. You may have seen this. Joe Rogan is totally disrupting the old legacy media. According to Q3 ratings, Rogan's podcast gets literally 4 times the views of the highest rated news show on cable, such as Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity. Tucker's pulling in 3 million an episode. Rogan's pulling in 11 to 12 million an episode. And so when social media outlets attempted recently to censor Rogan's interview with Dr. Robert Malone and the whole notion of mass psychosis, it didn't matter. The censoring was futile. And that's because Rogan is part of a network society that's completely bypassing the old legacy media. And what does that bypassing mean for the legacy media? Well, it ultimately means that the mainstream media has largely lost its agenda-setting authority. Now, agenda-setting theory is a field of study that explores the influence of the media on setting the political agenda and prioritizing political causes and policies. It's long been recognized by the Academy that what the mainstream media focuses on or what current events get attention is the major driver of what counts as a viable political agenda, which of course is always radical left. And they've traditionally enacted this agenda setting through the twin processes known as framing and priming. Okay, framing and priming. Framing involves the narrative that the media fabricates to interpret events, and only those events that fit into the narrative. And the purpose of fabricating that narrative that interprets and explains events is in order to evoke what's called the priming of an audience. And priming involves the ways in which framing encourages and influences us to think, feel, and act in accordance with the media-driven narrative. So framing and priming are the primary ways in which the mainstream media exercises its agenda-setting authority. So what's happening here is that with the rise of the network society, that capacity for the media to create a monolithic narrative, which deliberately aims to prime audiences toward their far-left agenda, that capacity ends up basically dying. And as such, the mainstream media can no longer fulfill its traditional agenda-setting function in society. The mainstream media has basically been defanged. And as a result, so has their COVID narrative. Now, before we go, you'll definitely want to check out my latest video on how Biden was just absolutely humiliated by a Democrat governor. You heard that right. A Democrat governor who was just officially declared that the pandemic is over for his state. You are not going to want to miss it. So make sure to click on the link, and I'll see you over there. God bless.